Paper 2, Question 4, Climbing Mountains. Lesson objectives. All learners will read 2 texts on climbing mountains, plan an answer to Paper 2, Question 4 on climbing mountains, and write a pass grade answer to Paper 2, Question 4 on climbing mountains. Source A. Source A is an extract from Touching the Void, in which experienced climber Joe Simpson describes how he and fellow climber Simon Yates scaled a 21,000-foot mountain in Peru. On the way down, Joe fell and broke his leg. In this extract, Joe explains how, because of his broken leg, Simon had to lower him down the mountain using a rope. The col was exposed and windy. Directly beneath us, the glacier we had walked up 5 days ago curved away towards the crevasses which led to the base camp, nearly 3,000 feet below us. It would take many long lowerings, but it was all downhill, and we had lost the sense of hopelessness that had invaded us at the ice cliff. "What time is it?" Simon asked. "Just gone 4, we don't have much time, do we?" I could see him weighing up the possibilities. I wanted to carry on down, but it was Simon's decision. I waited for him to make up his mind. "I think we should keep going," he said at last. Simon let me slide faster than I'd expected, and despite my cries of alarm and pain, he'd kept the pace of descent going. I stopped shouting to him after 50 feet. The rising wind and continuous avalanches drowned out all communications. Instead, I concentrated on keeping my leg clear of the snow. It was an impossible task. Despite lying on my good leg, the right boot snagged in the snow as the weight of my body pushed down. Each abrupt jerk caused searing pain in my knee. I sobbed and gasped, swore at the snow and the cold, and most of all at Simon. At the changeover point, I hopped onto my left leg, trying to think the pain away. It ebbed slowly, leaving a dreadful throbbing ache and a leaden tiredness. The tugs came again far too soon, and carelessly I slumped against the rope and let myself go. The drop went on until I could bear it no longer, yet there was nothing that I could do to bring the agony to an end. Howling and screaming for Simon to stop achieved nothing. The blame had to lie somewhere, so I swore Simon's character to the devil. The terrible sliding stopped, and I hung silently against the slope. 3 faint tugs trembled the taut rope, and I hopped up onto my leg. The wave of nausea and pain swept over me. I was glad of the freezing blasts of snow biting into my face. My head cleared as I waited for the burning to subside from my knee. Several times I had felt it twist sideways when my boot snagged. There would be a flare of agony as the knee kinked back and parts within the joint seemed to shear past each other with a sickening gristly crunch. I had barely ceased sobbing before my boot snagged again. At the end, my leg shook uncontrollably. I tried to stop it shaking, but the harder I tried, the more it shook. I pressed my face into the snow, gritted my teeth, and waited. At last it eased. Simon had already started to climb down. I looked up, but failed to make out where he was. I began digging Simon's belay seat. It was warming work and distracted attention from my knee. When I looked up again, Simon could be seen descending quickly. "At this rate, we should be down by 9 o'clock, he said cheerfully. "I hope so." I said no more. It wouldn't help to harp on about how I felt. "Right, let's do it again." He had seated himself in the hole and had the ropes ready for another lowering. "You're not hanging around, are you? Nothing to wait for, come on." He was still grinning, and his confidence was infectious. Who said one man can't rescue another, I thought. We had changed from climbing to rescue, and the partnership had worked just as effectively. We hadn't dwelt on the accident. There had been an element of uncertainty at first, but as soon as we'd started to act positively, everything had come together. "Okay, ready when you are," I said, lying down on my side again. "Slow down a bit this time. You'll have my leg off otherwise." He didn't seem to hear me, for I went down at an even faster pace than before, and the hammering torture began again with a vengeance. My optimism evaporated. Summarise the events and relationships. What's the relationship between the 2 people? What are the narrator's feelings? What happens? What's the relationship between the 2 people? They're friends who are climbing together. What are the narrator's feelings? He's in agony. He's angry with Simon as a way to let off his pain. He knows Simon wants to keep him safe. It's a successful partnership. What happens? Joe's leg has been broken. Simon wants to get him off the mountain before dark and as quickly as possible. Source B. In 1899, British explorer Gertrude Bell set out to climb one of the most dangerous mountains in the Alps, the Miger. Source B is an extract from the letter she sent home, describing the climb. Monday the 28th of August, 1899. I thought you would gather from my last letter that I meant to have a shot at climbing the Miger, and would be glad to hear that I descended safely. Well, I'll tell you, it's awful. I think if I'd known exactly what was before me, I should not have faced it, but fortunately I did not, and I look back on it with complete satisfaction, and I look forward to other things with no further apprehension. I left here on Friday, having hired a local guide, Marius, and we walked up to the refuge. I went out to watch the beautiful red sunlight fading from the snow and rocks. The Miger looked dreadfully forbidding in the dusk. When I came in, I found that Marius had kindly put my rug in a corner of the floor, and what with the straw and my cloak for a pillow, I made myself very comfortable. The night lasted from 8 till 12, but I didn't sleep at all. We got up soon after 12, and I went down to the river and washed a little. It was a perfect night, clear stars and the moon not yet over the hills. We left just as the moon shone into the valley. Marius always went ahead and carried a lantern till we got to the snow, when it was light enough with only the moon. At 1:30 we reached the glacier and put on our ropes. It wasn't really cold, though there was an icy little breath of wind. We had about 3 hours up a very nice rock. I had been in high spirits, for it was so easy, but before long my hopes were dashed. We had about 2 hours and a half of awfully difficult rock. There were 2 places where Marius literally pulled me up like a parcel. He has the strength of a bear, and it was absolutely sheer down. The first half hour I gave myself up for lost. It didn't seem possible that I could get up all that wall without ever making a slip. You see, I had practically never been on a rock before. However, I didn't let on to Marius, and presently it began to seem quite natural to be hanging by my eyelids over an abyss. We stayed on the summit until 11. It was gorgeous, quite cloudless. I went to sleep for half an hour. It's a very long way up, but it's a longer way down, unless you take the way Marius's axe took. The cord by which it was carefully tied to his wrist broke, and it disappeared forever into space. Here comes the worst place on the whole Miger. Marius vanished, carrying a very long rope, and I waited. Presently I felt a little tug on the rope. "Mademoiselle!" called Marius calmly, and obediently off I went. There were 2 little humps to hold on to, an overhanging rock, and there was me in mid-air and Marius round the corner steadfastly holding the rope tight. Perfectly fearful. I thought at the time how very well I was climbing, and how odd it was that I should not be afraid. The worst was over by then, and the most tedious part was to come. There was no difficulty, but there was also no moment when you had not to pay the strictest attention. There was an hour of ice and rock, till at last Marius and I found ourselves, with thankfulness, back on the glacier. When I got in, I found everyone in the hotel on the doorstep waiting for me, and the hotel owner let off crackers, to my great surprise. I went to bed and knew no more till 6 this morning, when I had 5 cups of tea and read your letters, and then went to sleep again until 10. I'm really not tired, but my shoulders and necks and arms feel rather sore and stiff, and my knees are awfully bruised. Summarise the events and relationships. What's the relationship between the 2 people? What are the narrator's feelings? What happens? What's the relationship between the 2 people? Their employer and employee. What are the narrator's feelings? They're mixed. She's a little fearful at times, but her feelings change to calmness and satisfaction. What happens? Gertrude climbs safely to the summit and descends safely, cared for and assisted by her guide. She aches a little at the end. This is question 1. Stop the video to read the different options. These are questions 2 and 3. Stop the video to read them. This video is going to focus on question 4. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B. Compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures in the mountains. In your answer, you could compare their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures, compare the methods the writers use to convey their feelings and perspectives, and support your response with references to both texts. When you're answering this question, remember you're going to use the PETA, petal structure, point, evidence, meaning quotations, technique, and importantly, and for at least half of your paragraph, the analysis, the effect on the reader, what do you understand, and its implications. So you start with the point that you want to make. How are they different or the same? Mention quotations and what those quotations say to you. So those would be the techniques and the effect on the reader. And don't forget to analyse. So you really need to go into a lot of detail about what effect those quotations have on the reader and what the reader understands. That should be half of your paragraphs. So what topics are addressed in the text? Well, there's hope and loss of hope as well in text A, and satisfaction in text B. There's quite a lot of fear in text A and some in text B, pain and in text A and aches in text B. There's the relationship with their climbing partner, trust in both, but also frustration in text A because of the pain. Both use ropes to assist them by their partner, and only text B covers the ascent, but both cover the descent. Here is a plan to help you get started on this question. The question is, compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures in the mountains. So I've taken the topics of hope and confidence in their climbing partner and return to the base camp. So in text A, with Joe and Simon, the modern text, the point that I've made about hope is that he is in agony but feels hopeful until the last line, when there's a quote that very clearly shows that he's lost his hope. And you need to follow that with the quote, which is the example, state what technique the author is using, and analyse what that makes you understand. In text B, Gertrude aches a bit at the end, but we know that she gets back safely and she's pleased with herself. You need to follow that again with quotations, which are examples, technique and analysis. The other topic is confidence in their climbing partner and the return to base. So the point that you would make is that he's sometimes angry with Simon as a way to let off steam because of the pain, but he knows Simon wants to keep him safe and it's a successful partnership. We don't know what happens on the descent, so then you need to do your example, technique and analysis. And Gertrude has full confidence in Marius, and we know she returns safely as the letter's a flashback, which is different to text A. So then you follow that by your example, technique and analysis. So we're going to move on to some actual answers from the Markscheme. Here is a level 3, so grade 4 and above, answer to this question. You need to show that you're comparing the ideas and perspectives in a clear and relevant way. So you need to explain how the methods are used, select relevant detail, and show a clear understanding of the ideas and perspectives in both texts. So you do have to show that you do understand how the texts are different. The writer in source A is uncertain how he feels, as his emotions switch from feeling hopeful at times to feeling hopeless. This is shown by starting the extract with, we had lost that sense of hopelessness, but ending the extract with, my optimism evaporated. So the reader can share his feelings of hope and despair. This is different to source B, where the writer opens her letter stating that she has descended safely. This means the reader knows how it ends, and so doesn't get as involved in the writer's emotions as they do in source A. The rest of the letter describing the climb is like a flashback, but there's less suspense because the reader already knows that she gets back safely. She feels complete satisfaction about her adventure, demonstrating how delighted she is that she has returned successfully with only a few bruises, even though she knew she was risking her life. This is a level 4 answer, so this would be grades 6 to 9, 7 to 9. So I shall read it to you. You have to compare your ideas and perspectives in a perceptive way, show an extra insight. The writer in source A is tortured by alternating hope and despair as the reader is led on a roller coaster journey, sharing the highs and lows of his emotions. The writer opens with a glimpse of hope after feeling a sense of hopelessness, only for this hope to be dashed in the final devastating short sentence, "My optimism evaporated," leaving the reader literally and metaphorically on a cliffhanger. Although both are mostly chronological accounts, the two sources could not be structured more differently, because whilst the purpose in source A is to terrify and shock, the writer's purpose in the letter in source B is to reassure and calm. So the reader knows from the start that she has descended safely, and the potential drama is reduced in the narrative flashback which follows. However, this loss of emotional engagement leaves us able to judge for ourselves whether the writer feels smug and complacent in stating her complete satisfaction, or whether she is justifiably proud of her outstanding, death-defying achievement. The mark scheme gives you some other things that you can talk about. So other things you can mention in this answer might be their previous experience, their enjoyment, their suffering, their success, their gender, their expectations, and their purpose in writing. Don't forget that in the red box it states that a student has to deal with both texts to achieve level 3 or above. Level 3 means a pass grade. You can't pass this question unless you address both texts. Some of the methods that it suggests that you could use are structural shifts, highly detailed in source A and episodic in source B, structural viewpoint, first-person narratives, and descriptive, almost third-person or reflective in source B. Whole text structure, chronological in both, but the openings are very different. Tone, dramatic and distressed in source A, and cheerful and ironic in source B. Language features, figurative language in source A, understatement and hyperbole in source B, and the word choice. So it's now time for you to construct a question 4 answer on this text. Feel free to try the other questions too, and although I haven't given you the support for those questions, it will all be good practice. Here is section B, question 5, the writing question. Please stop the video if you would like to do this question. Lesson objectives. All learners will read 2 texts on climbing mountains, plan an answer to paper 2 question 4 on climbing mountains, and write a pass grade answer to paper 2 question 4 on climbing mountains.